Hey guys, Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com, back for another session of High Power University. And this is kind of a part 2 of a Charles Daly high power restoration that we have done. And we're just about getting ready to send this back to our BH veteran. By the way, we've put a pair of BH Masters grips on there with a likeness of John Browning on the left grip and checkered and BH Spring Solutions logo on the right grip, and these are going to be complimentary to the BH veteran who was so good to allow us to use his Charles Daly high power in this presentation as we have. You'll remember from the kind of part 1 of this trigger subject on the Charles Daly, we finally got to a point where we're a little bit better on the lot better on the trigger pull, and we're going to check that here one more time again. And you'll see there it's breaking about 5 3/8. And boy, with this 9mm trigger and the new advanced trigger subassembly from BH Spring Solutions, it's really come in with the trigger pull is quite great. By the way, my manual cocking there was to make the slide easier to rack. I kind of fouled up and cut my thumb in a critical place that's important for slide racking the other day. So anyway, I'm going to show you something here real quick, and this is going to tail off of the subject, and I am going to be playing with some live ammunition here. But the subject of the FEG high powers, and I've made this statement that their margins and their tolerances were just all over the place. The Charles Dalys were made from FEG frames and slide stock. So was the Kareen Mark I. So was the Mauser ADSA, and of course the FEGs. And when I have said that the margins and tolerances were all over the place, I'm going to show you just one example, but I mean this is all over this pistol. And here's what I want to show you. Okay. As I was racking the slide, I just had that happen. And that looks like a failure to feed, and that would normally lead you to think this is a barrel problem of some sort. And of course, I was just trying to dry cycle some ammunition. But here's what I want to show you. This is where I'm going with this. The extractor claw is already holding the cartridge casing. This fail to feed is happening because this extractor is holding that casing so tight that the casing itself cannot, in this area here, rise this direction so that it actually can feed. This was discovered because I put an FN Browning extractor as a replacement into this Charles Daly, and I immediately had that happen. And this is where I'm going with this. I want to show you that after I safely clear this. Where I'm going with this is I'm going to show you what I mean, just for starters, about these margins and these tolerances in the FEG product and those who finished them that are just kind of all over the place. Again, that is an extractor issue. It looks like a fail to feed issue, and it is failing to feed, but it's not failing to feed is not the actual issue at play here. So what I'm going to do, and the reason I went down the road of this extractor is because I was having some abnormal extraction. Extraction was happening straight up. It was actually, flipping out and managing to go up and land on the top of the slide at times, kind of barely lopping out of the gun, but they were going kind of everywhere and all over the place. So I went looking for, what's going on here, and I'm going to give you an example in a second. We're going to have this extractor on out of here. And there's the FN extractor. Here's the original extractor. I do want to show you one thing real quickly, and I want to point you to look at how thin this metal is across the top of the Charles Daly extractor, and take a look at the FN. The width of this piece of metal between the circle and the top here and the circle and the top here, the minimal part here on the Charles Daly extractor is 0.53 millimeters. The FN or Browning is 0.8 millimeters, and this is really, really thin right in here. But you see, this is a dimensional difference. It's quite a difference. There's another difference going on in the Charles Daly slide, and I'm going to show it to you here. This hole where your extractor spring goes has got this extractor spring riding quite impressively high in its presentation there out of the channel. It's causing a lot of pressure on the extractor itself. It's creating a hold on the cartridge casing that is just unbelievable, actually. So we're going to go ahead and pop the original extractor back in there. This slide is very unforgiving on the positioning of this extractor pin as well. It can only be just where it's got to be, or it'll be in there too far. So we'll pop the sear lever back in. Okay. Oh, by the way, before we do that, I want to grab an ammunition cartridge and I want to slide it up in there. And it's even this extractor is very, very, very snug. And one of the other things that I noticed was the original ejector. The original ejector is here. Here's a new FN ejector. And, you know, it doesn't take a gauge. You can see the difference. Have a lot more engagement area down here on the new FN extractor. This one has been kind of excessively angle filed, which is normal. It's an angle file point on the FN too, but it's been kind of excessively angle filed, and it's brought this ejector out to kind of a point. And that was not working at all because it was not conclusively dislodging the ejecting empty shell casing from this extractor. And so that didn't work. So we did replace the ejector. But in lieu of the fact that I would need to do some very finite filing on the underneath side of this extractor claw, or I could start to try to modify the extractor spring and lighten that a little bit, which would be another possible way. Right now, what I notice is I just don't have a lot of range of movement in that extractor at all. It's a very hard push. I do have a little bit of range, but you know, it is what it is. Okay, and so now we have replaced the original extractor, and we're going to reassemble. And what I want to show you is that quote, fail to feed. You're not going to see that now. I know this because there's been about 75 rounds go through this combination that I'm now working with. So chamber's very clean. And we're not going to fail at this point. So that fixes, in that instance, that fixed our quote, fail to feed. This original Charles Daly extractor is holding plenty well. When I replaced out the ejector, I started getting consistent ejecting empty shell case distance. a couple of other fine tuning things that I could do if I felt like I needed to, but I don't at this point because I've really poured several magazines through this very, very rapid fire, got good consistent ejection distances out of this combination. So we're going to just leave this one alone at this point. But I wanted to show you this because this is the only model, the FEG frame stock, slide stocks, and it's only some of them where we run into this business of a FN Browning extractor not dropping in and being virtually perfect. I do have some other interesting news for high power guys. This hole you saw where the extractor spring is set, that hole, we're now finding the depth of that hole has some variances. It's another one of those little margins and tolerances in the FEG specifically that is all over the place. But the depth of this hole is going to determine how much pressure the extractor spring places on the extractor. In this particular model, it's maxed out. I mean, we just couldn't have more force being put on this extractor because, you know, if we do, in the case of the FN extractor, which, you know, that placement of the hole I showed you, yeah, that's enough to make that extractor even more rigid than the Charles Daly extractor that's in here, and it just causes it to just hold an unreasonable way, so that the cartridge casing can't move behind the extractor claw at all in order to position, in order to go in the handgun. But anyway, so we now have our BH Veterans Charles Daly. This is now going to be cleared for takeoff to go back to its home, and at this point we've got beautiful trigger pull, very manageable amount of reset. We have positive ejection now of, you remember the magazines that were kind of holding up in the pistol, we're positively ejecting those now. Everything test fires out beautifully at this point. We think our customer's going to enjoy these Masters grips. They make the grip frame the shape that your hand makes when you take your hand and you hold your hand like this. That's essentially the shape that Masters grips makes when you wrap your hand around the grip frame plus the grips. We've got the SFS installed, the new advanced trigger subassembly, and we've worked our way through the nuances of another FEG frame stock, slide stock, high power creation called the Charles Daly. Thanks for watching this, guys. The real unique stuff that we encounter, but understanding what we encountered in this handgun can it's good information to have in the memory bank for other models, because you know, interesting margins and tolerances happen sometimes in lots of places. So thank you very much for watching. Mark Allen, BH Spring Solutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com. Okay, guys, back for the final version of the case study here of this Charles Daly high power. I had mentioned that tolerances and margins are kind of all over the place. You'll see this is the original FEG barrel. It fits in here just fine. This is a BH Spring Solutions barrel that's been in and out of God only knows how many high powers at this point. Many of our BH veterans have actually had this barrel around the country, put it in their high powers, tested with it. They loved it. But I want to show you, when I put this barrel in, I've got a relationship problem right there, and it gets stuck actually. And when you put this barrel in the slide, you feel it very erratic. There's metal to metal, it just gets hung up, kind of bound up right there. The fix for this would be just polishing bobs and polishing compounds on the laterals, so on the sides of the barrel cam lug, until it goes in and out without any interference, like I'm getting right at that point right there. So that's one of the nuances that we've seen. It's not a big deal. I decided to go a step further on this whole issue of this extractor. I now have a FN high power extractor in here. I've got some reasonable resistance on the extractor. When I do the shake test with the extractor, this is the same FN extractor. I've not filed on it. I've not done anything to the part necessarily. Now we slide back in behind the extractor with the casing much more reasonably. Still very, very good hold, but now it's reasonable. I took a small grinder tool on a Dremel, and I mean, you can even feel that what I just did here. Before I did what I'm going to tell you I did, it was a job to get that lodged in there. You remember I tried to chamber around with this FN extractor in here, and it was even holding so tight it wouldn't even allow the cartridge to get the right angle on the barrel even. Now everything is much more reasonable. We're going to show a little shooting with this here in a moment, but just to show you that this is now working. I showed the malfunction. It looked like a failure to feed. I took a little grinder tool, and on the extractor spring, here's the extractor spring that I took out. And I don't know if this will show up in the video or not, but this extractor spring is started trying to not be exactly straight. It's kind of starting to get a curve to the body of it, if you will. And that's a spring trying to get itself out of the position that it's in very badly, because it's now deforming. And this is a nuance. This is not a spring problem with the extractor spring. That same extractor spring drops in and out of virtually every high power that's ever been made. But in this instance, it was creating a very heavy resistance on the extractor itself. And so what I did was I took a small grinder tool and I removed from the bottom of the extractor spring, that's going to be the fat end here. You got one end that gets narrow or more conical shape. That's the one you want facing upwards when you install the spring down. On the bottom side here, I took about a half to 3/4 of the bottom coil, and I just took and went through it with a little grinder tool until I could just pop it off, and that's what I did. I took about a half a coil off of that bottom side. Should not mess with the integrity of the spring so much over time, but it made everything here in the slide and the hold on the cartridge casing much more reasonable. In fact, just exactly what we would want this to be. So now we're going to run outside real quick. We're not going to be doing any kind of accuracy testing today, because quite honestly, this High Power's original barrel needs a crown job very, very badly, and I wouldn't have high expectations for big accuracy out of this handgun today. But function was the big question for this High Power and for this BH Veteran, and the quality of trigger pull. That was another question. We'll get an empty magazine here and show that one more time. Very, very, very consistent. We're about 5 5/8 this time. It was 5 3/8 a little while ago. That's within a quarter of a pound. So we're going to relocate, run outside, and what we're going to be doing is just a quick function fire test. But the main thing I'm looking for is the consistency of the ejecting empty shell casings. Are these things really happening with any kind of consistency? Because when this firearm first got here, we were tossing them straight up in the air, falling over my right hand, when I was shooting, that kind of thing. And it just wasn't, it's kind of real dicey, but it was all had to do with this extractor that was just holding just like a beast. So anyway, we're going to pop outside and finish this up. Hey guys, this is going to be our last function test of the Charles Daly High Power that we've now been all over the place with. And the main thing I'm looking for here is, this is not an accuracy test today. This is purely a function test. I'm wanting to see the consistency of the ejecting empty shell casings. That's going to tell me a little bit about how well the extractor is holding on to the empty cartridge casings as they're coming rearward to the ejector. Obviously, we want to see perfect function, but the main thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for the consistency of the ejected empty shell casing. So I'm going to stand here just shooting into the ground down the hill, and so hopefully we're going to be able to get a good visual of this.